Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the craziest event that you've made it out alive from? Please remember to like, share, hype, and subscribe. Someone lit my car on fire at 3 a.m. and I woke up to my house already going up in flames. Almost died from smoke, fire, and the power lines falling down beside us, and as we ran out. We all made it out alive, thankfully. My wife and I were in separate cars heading to a military base to drop a car off for our son, who had been away for National Guard drill. We were driving about 50 miles per hour when a driver coming from the opposite side of traffic cut a hard left turn, barely missing my wife, and hit me head on. Our cars were totaled, and if it weren't for modern safety devices, we both would have died or suffered life-altering injuries. In 1998, I went to a Slayer concert at a relatively small venue. I loved the band, but I didn't appreciate how violent the crowd was going to be. There were groups punching on in the mosh pit as soon as it started, and it was too packed in to move away. Tom Araya called out one guy, a big angry skinhead who seemed a foot taller than nearly everyone else, and threatened to stop the show if the fighting didn't stop. Midway through raining blood, I was knocked down in the middle of the mosh and could not get back to my feet. I had people falling on top of me and I could barely breathe. After what felt like the longest time, the same big angry skinhead picked me up from the ground, held me up, and let out a primal roar in my face. I survived the rest of the concert and came outside afterwards to see the street lined with police cars. In hindsight, it was one of the best concerts ever, but I feel like the angry skinhead saved my life. I think I still have guitar picks somewhere from that night. A few years ago, struggling with job hunting, I decided to drive on a rideshare app. One Sunday morning, a trip request turned out to be a robbery hijacking. The rider pulled a gun on me as soon as they got in. 3 others came out of nowhere right then. I was searched and forced in the boot trunk. This was around 9 o'clock in the morning, and they spent the day driving around randomly robbing people. Later, the one in charge promised they'd let me go free, but they left that task to a teenager who felt sour they wouldn't let him drive earlier. He picked up his girlfriend and went joyriding. Eventually, my people sent out the tracking company to find the car because I was unreachable for too long. The kid tried to outrun the guards and police once they caught up. He missed a turn and literally flew the car off a steep riverbank. I could feel the car was not on the ground for a good while. Somehow I managed to walk away with a dislocated shoulder and a few bruises. The Plainfield tornado. It was a rain-wrapped F5 that had no warning. The sirens only went off about 2 minutes after it had lifted. My family was driving right into its path, our station wagon getting pelted with hail, when my dad noticed shingles tumbling out of the sky. He spun the car around and sped back in the direction we were coming from. We would have died and driven right into it. When I was 7 or so, my mom and I were moving to another state and we were on the highway. I got tired and hopped in the back seat to sleep. A few minutes later, my mom screamed and I opened my eyes to an 8x4 sheet of drywall coming through the windshield. It hit the driver's side pillar and rotated, driving the corner into the passenger seat. We were fine, except my mom had some bruising on her arms and had some glass in my eyes. There was a grapefruit-sized hole completely through the passenger seat where my head would have been. It's an even split between bolt from the blue lightning struck a lightning rod on top of a light pole about 6 feet from me. I'd literally just walked away from that spot and gotten into my security cart, basically just a fully enclosed golf cart, after having a smoke break on the top level of a parking garage. A storm had recently passed over, but it was miles away, and we had clear skies overhead, so I figured it was safe. I can't even describe how loud it was. And the other was when a brake line blew in my 99 Explorer on the highway. I was doing about 80 miles per hour, speed of traffic for that stretch on I-95, in the left lane, and there was a sudden dead stop ahead. I hit the brakes to start slowing down, heard a thunk pop, and, well, didn't slow down any. Through sheer fucking luck and either accidentally or instinctively dropping down a gear over the next 15 to 20 seconds, I managed to swing onto the left shoulder, swing back into the left lane just before the shoulder ended, veer into the middle lane, jump back into the left lane, and then finally found a clean river through the middle and right lanes onto the right shoulder. All in heavy and nearly standstill traffic. Once I was fully on the shoulder, I was able to reach the emergency brake. It was one of those left side pedal types, but too high to easily use in an emergency, thanks Ford, and actually stop the truck. Got out, panic puked a little, checked on my dog, she was fine, and then collapsed into a full-on panic attack. Thankfully, a bunch of people pulled over to help. I assume because it was standstill traffic, and they had nothing better to do, lol, and pretty much handled everything for me, while some nice old ladies sat with me, and like some couple walked my dog, some dude went under my truck and diagnosed, found the line that ruptured. A lady called AAA to get me a tow, and some other guy set up flares. Outside the Baghdad International Airport, we were patrolling for rocket and mortar sites. We found a pretty secluded spot to hole up and overwatch a back road near a large property mound. We sit there for about an hour when the other truck reports seeing silhouette movement atop the mound. We decide they'll stay in place and our truck would move around to cut off an escape. Driver fires up the truck and starts to move out when boom! The IED that was buried just a few feet away from us the whole time goes off. It sent fragments through my driver's head, whom I was sitting directly behind, into my gunner's legs, whom I was sitting inches away from. It blasted my door off, basically hit everyone and everything in the truck except me. Took me a long time digesting that. Guy cut the Jacob's ladder on the freighter we were boarding in the Malacca Strait. I hit the water wearing 45-ish pounds, 22 kilograms of gear at 16 knots. Felt my life jacket get yanked over my head as I hit the water. I swear someone reached in the water and just caught my hand as I lost grip on the tattered life jacket. I broke the surface and one of our boat crew got a boat hook for me to grab. After being pulled back in, all boat crews swear I was 60 feet, 18 meters in front of them on impact since I was last off. No one could or did reach in the water for me from their report. The only reason they drove up was for potential body recovery, hence the boat hook. It broke my right collarbone, was unable to swim or rescue myself since I'm right-handed, arm flat out and wouldn't raise. Took 2 guys to pull me out of the water since I was basically helpless. No matter how much I argued, my statement wasn't accepted until I removed the part that someone grabbed me. I was in shock, I was delirious, I misremembered. 6 witnessed my fall. No way I could recall correctly. I took the hint, reworked the statement, and finished my tour. I know what it feels like to be pulled in water, and I know what I am here because someone or something did. Whether the boat was closer and didn't want to be in trouble for being too close, or divine intervention, I'm alive. I just like to know who to thank. There's a lot of harrowing tales here, and a lot of them make sense, especially dealing with car accidents, and sometimes it may just be luck, divine intervention, or happenstance, but I'm glad all of you are here, and the stories are scary, but enlightening, so have a great day. In my friend's motor-swapped Honda CRX, he was driving on a winding road after a summer rain. He lost control and we spun out counterclockwise into the oncoming lane. I remember looking out the passenger side window on the back end of a full 360 and seeing this silver bulldog looking down on the word Mac, glistening as the car corrected back clockwise. We missed becoming a meat-stuffed pancake by less than 3 feet and maybe an eighth of a second. He sold the car the next week. When I was in China about 20 years ago, I was at a traditional music theater production. I needed the bathroom and couldn't find it. The receptionist pointed in a general direction, and I still couldn't find it. Asked again and got the same response, but that was again useless. Asked again, and some man in a suit walks up to me, speaks perfect English, and says, "I'll show you." Bear in mind, I'm about 10 years old. The guy leads me through corridors, and then finally we enter the kitchens. He opens the next door, and it's the street. I turn on my heel and sprint back the way I came. I made the receptionist leave her desk and show me. Swimming pool electrocution. Actually went under at 2 a.m. and by luck my roommate and neighbor heard my last gulp for help. Second up would be my father and me, rolling our family Datsun off an emergency drain that, coming back from Yellowstone, truck was completely destroyed and the people behind us thought we were dead. Had over stuff happen as well. Had a gun pulled on me by some egotistical that wanted to mess with some teenagers. Even though I had that thing pointed straight at my face, I ran, jumped over a fence into a yard, and then ran through several more yards, and hid while imploring the neighbor not to shoot me, just call the cops. As soon as I saw the lights of the cop car, I jumped the fence and ran out into the street, only to have two cops frantically screaming at me to get on the floor with hands raised, while they pointed their guns at me. I was just a skinny teenager standing on our block with some friends. My family took a guided horse ride in the mountains from Real de Catorce, the same place they filmed The Mexican, and as we were walking along this ridge, my horse got spooked. Earlier, my sister and I had some fun prodding our horses to go faster, but this was a flat-out run. So I'm barely holding on from falling off the horse and down the ridge to my left when my horse reared back and I fell to the right and landed just a few feet from a vertical shaft down to the mines below. I don't know how far down I would have fallen before dying, but it felt like it was more Moria way down there. We had dropped a few rocks into another ventilation shaft, and they sounded very deep. Needless to say, I did not get back on the horse that day. 4 years ago, I was in absolutely crazy pain with my hip, groin, and leg. Couldn't walk, put any weight on it. I tried showering and was screaming in pain, nearly passed out. My leg turned purple and was freezing cold. Went to A&E, and this useless doctor did an x-ray for a dislocated hip, then told me I was just cold and to go home. COVID measures were still in place, so husband couldn't stay with me. When he came to get me, the intake staff were really surprised I was being released, as they'd seen my leg. We get home around 2 a.m. I wrapped my entire leg in a heated blanket and tried to sleep. Woke up, and my leg had ballooned to twice its normal size. Rang 111, and they told me to go back to A&E. This time before I even had a blood test, they wrote PCD on the intake form. Phlegmasia ceruleus Dorlans, life-threatening complications of DVT. Had blood test. Doctor pulled me aside and said my bloods were through the roof for blood clots. Go into this little room and a doctor shows me all these clots in my groin on an ultrasound machine. Quite fascinating to see. Got told I saved my own life by wrapping my leg in heated blankets, as it dilated blood vessels enough for a tiny amount of blood to get through. Without heat, blood was cut off to my leg, and I was hours away from losing my leg or dying. Basically was riddled with huge clumps of clots through my thigh, groin, abdomen. Anyway, super scary, but still here. Also had a wild ride in the worst hospital ward I've ever been in. One woman was bipolar, not medicated properly, and would throw shit across the room and flip out. Another was a druggie. She'd fallen and whacked her head, but kept pulling all her wires and drips out and escaping. The other woman, they'd overdosed on morphine, so she was in a coma for a few days. She'd then been left on that ward because she needed oxygen 24/7, and they couldn't find a mobile oxygen tank. I wrote a 5-page complaint to the hospital, and that original doctor was no longer allowed to be in A&E. Probably should have sued, but I was so traumatized and happy to be alive I didn't. Had to learn to walk unaided again, but can now walk 3 to 4 miles a day. Sometimes still get pain, but just thankfully they eventually took me seriously, and I lived to tell the tale. April 27, 2011, in northern Alabama. The sky turned green and everything went silent as my family and I huddled in the middle of a hallway. Our house was the only one on the block without a functioning basement or storm shelter, and with one arm around my little sister and the other around my parakeet's cage, I prepared myself for the worst. Everything started swirling around us. I could hear it through the Hello Kitty bedsheet we used as curtains for my room, which was straight across from the highway. A tree at least a century old fell toward us from the neighbor's yard, short of our house by inches. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. If I had it touched down, we would have been dead. My mom was telling us to pray and be ready to go to heaven and meet Jesus. When the tornado did touch down, it was rated an F4, I believe, and caused multiple casualties. The whole super outbreak killed over 300 people. We narrowly cheated death that day. Was walking home from a club in London, early 2000s, with a bunch of friends at about 2 a.m. On the other side of the road, there was a fella yelling at some girl. I could see she was cowering away from him. He grabbed her by the hair and started dragging her. All the while, my friends, I'm a 5'1" female, male and female, just carried on walking. I started to walk over to the other side of the road to help. Halfway I yelled at the wanker to leave her alone. He stopped, looked at me, let go of her hair, and smashed his beer bottle on the ground and lobbed it at me. I felt it brush the side of my face. This was my brush with death. The woman came running over toward me. We went back to the other side of the road to safety, and I asked her if she could get home. She told me she had no money and was scared of him as they lived together. I gave her money for a cabbie and told her to go to her mom's house or a friend. I was amazed that the cars were just going straight past, not getting involved. Even the friends that I was with just kept on walking. What kind of person just walks past abuse? As I taught my kids years later, a strong man stands up for himself. A stronger man stands up for others. Ben, a good cow. I realized some good came from this, as it taught me to teach my kids how to be better humans. When I was a teenager, I went on an exchange program to Costa Rica. One day, we went to a beach on the Pacific coast. I was swimming in the water and turned around to realize I was way out from the shore. Yep, I'd been caught in a rip. I had no knowledge of the situation or how to get out of it. But as I bobbed up enough to see my friends on the beach, I could see them waving their arms telling me to swim parallel to the beach. That's what I did, but kind of angled back to the shore. After what felt like an eternity, I finally made it back and collapsed in the sand. When we got back to my host family's house, the mother showed me an article in the paper about 2 people who had just died in a rip at the same beach the day before. I very recently got short of breath after watching a movie in the theater. My friend took me to the ER. I got sick, passed out. A CT scan showed the entrance to both lungs were full of blood clots. Visibility was too low for the medevac chopper to get me. 2-hour ambulance ride to a major hospital. Arrived at 5:30. By 11:30 I was in IR as they vacuumed clots. Took nearly 2 hours to get the ones that weren't attached. A literal handful were removed. No prior symptoms, no heart attack, no strokes. 4 weeks later, and I'm nearly back to normal. I was in a car accident that I don't remember anything about. I remember parts of the morning leaving home, but my next memory is waking up in the back of an ambulance and hearing my son crying and feeling blood go down my face and legs. I couldn't see anything. I asked my son if he was okay and said I would feel the blood coming from my leg and face, and then I lost consciousness again. Woke up again on a gurney in the ER, then again in the trauma room with my wife there. I was okay enough not moving. My son was okay, bump on his head, but he was discharged and I stayed in the hospital for a few more days. Couple of lacerations on my forehead and legs, couple of fractured vertebrae, but overall I made it out pretty okay considering. Car was totaled. I miss it to this day. Never found out what happened. I still feel lucky I'm here though. Twin pregnancy and birth. During my pregnancy, I had so many things go wrong with my body. I had swelling so bad that my pores were leaking fluid. My blood pressure was constantly at 90/100. I slept sitting up for 3 months because I couldn't breathe laying down. I couldn't eat or drink much because I would just automatically throw it up. I was constantly puking up stomach acid. I made it to almost 38 weeks and had a C-section. That part went smoothly and both babies, a boy and girl, were born healthy. Shortly after, I had mass hemorrhaging and ended up in congestive heart failure, where I spent almost 2 more weeks in the hospital. It was the most wild 9 months I've ever been through, and the hardest thing I've ever had to go through emotionally and physically. The twins are 7 months now and are healthy and thriving. They're the happiest babies I've ever seen. Even though I almost lost my own life in the process, I would do it all again for them. I was dispatched to a CPR in progress, arrived on scene, and the PT was not in cardiac distress. They were, however, under the influence of heroin, and the caller was elderly and had no idea what was going on. I arrived on scene, and after a few minutes of this person yelling and treating medics like shit, got up and walked away. I was getting ready to leave the area and observed a random car I hadn't seen before. Ran the plates and it was stolen. Different neighbor advised that the occupants of the car were the same subject of the medical call. I mentioned the subject about a block and a half away, and they wanted nothing to do with me. After 15 or so seconds of telling the subject to wait and briefly explaining they were legally being ordered to stop, I told them to put their bags down. That's when they started reaching into the duffel bag after being advised not to. The fight was on at that point, and for the next minute or so I held on to their right hand in the duffel bag, while wrestling to the ground and eventually arresting. A loaded .357 short barrel was found in the duffel bag after arrest. My cover that shift was an officer who was afraid of conflict and actually drove the opposite direction after hearing the tones and that I was contacting the subject. Made it out alive with a few scrapes, but boy am I glad I trusted my gut and relied on my training.